It's episode 41. It's episode 41 of the PoddyC. And we're talking about they've already announced the patch. I guess it's going to be 11.05, the 20th anniversary patch for World of Warcraft, featuring Blackrock Depths, the raid, classic time walking, and Dracthyr warriors and stuff. But also just a bunch of hero talent changes and things, reworks to a bunch of specs, and like Paladin's getting a bunch of sick talents. Dark Ranger is going from bad to sick thematically. I don't know. It's weird because it feels like we haven't actually played with the current versions of any of these things.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It made me think initially of like why. Okay, there was like a couple. I could probably even find one here if I pull it up, where it was like, why are we waiting 3 months for that? One of them was like, this ability's range has increased from 8 yards to 10 yards, and it's like, okay, if you feel that way now, why is it 3 months from now that's gonna be? A lot of the other stuff is, pretty in-depth, like reworky kind of things, like the ton of talents removed, things like that. And some of them are just like almost like bug fixes, and it's like, why would you wait until then for that? But it is interesting to see that. And it's also Dragonflight. Clearly the emphasis in Dragonflight, we saw this really near the end. Like the last patch was like Plunderstorm remix, season 4, whatever, right? Like they're just trying stuff. They're doubling down on that, and just they really want to advertise and incentivize people to not just play the beginning of the expansion, but like, you should keep playing, and here's why. I think that's why they're doing it. I think they're so invested on keeping people subbed year round that so many decisions have led to that.
I'm surprised you thought it was bad. I thought it was, they wanted to do this during beta, but they didn't have the time, and they couldn't have. You remember how Tettles in one of the episodes was saying how they had to like lock it in, and I think it was like maybe like 2-3 weeks before the expansion came out, or maybe a little bit more than that.
Wait, what do you mean?
Sure
well, you said at the very beginning, are you sure it's like that? I don't know. I didn't know what you were
like,
actually.
are you sure the intention was to have it be in the 0.5 patch? Because I'm pretty sure they like wanted all these reworks and class changes to be in before the expansion came out, like during beta, but it seemed like it was just like, incomplete, and they couldn't push it out in time. It was like, okay, launch is coming out soon, and we just have to like delay this until some later.
Well, of course,
points.
yeah, a launch is going to happen at some point. So like, imagine if you're doing like really design related things, there's a certain point where they just have to ship it. You're right. But it's not like from then until now those people stopped doing their job of designing classes, right? They were probably still doing that, but they didn't want to, like 2 weeks before a raid, for example, or whatever that cutoff point is, we're going to change, we're going to move around 10 talents, that's throwing tuning right out of whack for the beginning of the season. So I think it's more like, I think this is kind of always happening, where they do big bunches of tuning all at once, and then like for example, the beginning of Dragonflight, I bet the beginning of Dragonflight was the same thing, right? Like in beta they wanted to keep doing it, and then in the 0.5 patch there was a ton of stuff, 0.7 patch there was a ton of stuff, right? The ret rework, I bet they planned on all of that, right? It's just there's always constant iterations happening. I don't think it's like anything unique about the big launch of this one.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting this time around, because this is like the first time they've ever announced something so far in advance, right? Like we would have never heard of something that was supposed to be planned for a 0.5 patch before the season has even begun.
Yeah, that is fast. Although this time around, the 0.5 patch has to be faster because it's got to be for the anniversary, right? So that's maybe affecting it somewhat. But it is definitely strange that, like, there's like Paladin rework and like enhancement and elemental shaman rework stuff in there, when those specs and classes got a decent amount of rework in beta already and then haven't been played. It's like, what are they reworking off of, right? Like it's not based on like, here's what people played with on live. It's like, I guess, maybe with Dorky's argument, it's like, maybe this is the second half of the rework that they couldn't fit into the release window. Or maybe with Max's side of the argument is like, during the, last couple of months or last couple of weeks, they were thinking about what do we want to do next, and they were like, even though we just did elemental, let's go back and do some more to elemental because we've got some cool ideas, and we've got this really good new ascendance model that we've got to use for all the shamans you guys
I
see
think
in
they
that
look
thing.
sick. I
It's
saw
so
a lot of
funny.
mixed opinions. I think, well, I mean, for me, I just like stuff that looks really scuffed and crazy, and they definitely look crazy.
Yeah, if you're a
Yeah, now you
Blizzard
can look
dev,
like Lady Waycrest.
if you're a Blizzard dev and Max ever says I like the way that thing looks, you know it's chalked, it's over. It's
Yeah, you know you screwed up.
yeah.
you,
Come on,
you don't
man.
want to look like that.
So you guys don't like the shaman forms, I'm assuming.
I think it's funny. I like funny looking stuff
Dude,
as
what the
well.
fuck?
It's interesting.
Okay.
They look like those dolls. They look like those dolls with the like
Yeah, I
hair.
know. It looks,
Yeah.
they look
Lady
absolutely
Waycrest.
stupid. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, but yeah, they so yeah, but like you said, when they're announcing it now, I feel like it has to be a like in Dragonflight, I think they tried all of the like they did the trading posts, they did the constant updates, and I think they saw that that retained subscribers. When are you going to get the biggest boost of players, right? An expansion launch. What those people might not have been around for is all of that, right? So I guess they're the reason why I think they're doing it. Maybe it's announcing a 20th anniversary, but even then, you could have announced that a month from now, right? Like, it doesn't have to be announced now. I really think they just want everyone who's playing the game to know that, like, oh wait, before you stop playing the game, here's all the stuff that we've been doing for the past year, and we're going to continue to do it. Like, we are planning on constantly updating this game. I think it's more just like they have everyone's attention right now, so why not use that?
Well, do you guys think it's good that they announce something as big as this early on? Think about it for a second.
I don't know, but can you tell me why you are asking that? Like, what do you think?
Because like on one hand, it's nice that like we know what's gonna happen, but on the other hand, there's also a lot of people who are like super mixed on this. They're thinking like, oh man, like if this is happening in the future, then should I be planning on playing this class, or like do I even continue playing the class I'm playing right now if it's gonna be not as hot? I've been hearing a lot of these kinds of concerns because especially for like meta-driven players, like
Yeah, I was about to
these guys
say,
are the
I
ones
think
who are
non-meta driven players would
they're kind of
instantly
whatever.
never, which again, massively majority of the game. I don't think they would ever think what you just said, but I can see definitely Meyer, your Twitch chat, having that opinion over like after seeing this but I mean, I feel like that was already the writing on the wall. Like if you were gonna play a rogue, a demon hunter, a priest going into this patch, were you really under the assumption that like you weren't going to be getting big changes soon? Like you were the next class in line, right? Like those are
No,
gonna
let's say
happen.
you were on the fence of playing Hunter, right? Like let's say you decided against playing Hunter because it just seemed lame as fuck, but
They do
you
seem
kind
lame.
of wanted to play Hunter. Yeah, and then all of a sudden like this whole Dark Ranger shit is coming out. I was like, wait, maybe I should have just stuck with Hunter after all. Like it was gonna be sick. Or
Well, then you have
there's probably like a lot of back and forths.
you have multiple months to do. I don't know.
On the flip side as well, like, okay, here's another potential downside. You're playing Balanced Druid right now, and you kind of now know that help is not on the way until this patch comes out, right?
Yeah,
like, it's sort of like, but I feel like the reason they have to do it is because they're putting up the PTR, right? So you got to have the PTR notes for that. I do think probably absent that factor, they would have waited another little while, but they want to test all the anniversary events and stuff and make sure all that's smooth.
I'm not fully caught up on the design of Balanced Druid. Is Balanced Druid super cooked like to play? Like it's not fun and there's a lot of like bad decisions, or is it just that and people think that they're not strong?
You use your AoE builder on single target. That's like the biggest part of it.
The most recent
that sounds pretty bad.
Changes to it, like they did tuning changes to it that tried to address that somewhat, and the big changes coming are going to do much more of that, of making it so that like your spenders actually are doing more of your damage and you're pressing the right builder or spender in the right situations. But as of right now, it's like it's still pretty close to bad there. And also the numbers people aren't thrilled about, although you got to be careful of Moonkins because they do love a good gaslight.
Man, they're the best at it.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I wanted to kind of talk about. Number one, we had kind of talked about how hype this expansion launch would have been, and now we're kind of into the expansion for a little bit. And also, are people going to be, really liking WoW again? And I think generally from what I've seen from the public is that people are really, really happy with this expansion. The people who the first 2 weeks of this expansion are made for, which is definitely not anyone in this call. Actually, Dracthyr, I think, is an enjoyer. You're an enjoyer of everything WoW related. I think a little bit more than Dorky and I are. But like the people like every day on Twitter, I like randomly sometimes things get on my algorithm of people just like posting random memes about WoW, and they've just been gone for a while, and now they're just back, and every time they're on my timeline, it's like 2, 3, 5,000 likes of just people just something about the story. I don't even get it. I don't even know what they're talking about, but like they all know what it's talking about, which is great, right? So I think that as people have been referring to them as the moles, right? I think the moles fucking love this shit. And that's really good. That is the best thing that could happen for WoW, I think. So I'm glad that that is hit, and I think that the majority of people are going to really like the season too.
I think so as well. Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy the parts of WoW that are being featured by virtue of the other stuff not existing for these first couple of weeks. Although I am definitely the kind of player that loves a new WoW expansion for that feeling of like when you wake up, you want to play WoW. And when you go to bed, you're thinking about waking up the next day and playing WoW. And this expansion has not had that. Like this expansion, I've spent a lot of time doing things other than playing WoW in the first 2 weeks of the new expansion, which is that was like completely alien to how previous WoW expansions have been for me. But even that, I think that that's a reasonable sacrifice on the altar of making the game less like toxic for people that have less time to play it in the first few weeks. And we're still going to have a pretty hype. I think it's going to be Mythic Week probably is going to be that's probably going to be the hypest time for me, because I think Heroic Week even is also going to be pretty limited time value. Like I'm not going to feel like I want to have all of my waking hours spent in WoW or talking about WoW or whatever.
It's going to be very delve centric that week. If you have a lot of characters, you'll be doing many. Although that was nerfed today, right? Like the amount of delves you need to do. It's 8, so 8 per
what
character.
Got nerfed?
So
the amount of delves you need to do for the vault.
Yeah, the best great vault that you can earn reliably next week comes from Bountiful Delves. It's Hero 3, and obviously you can get better Hero from Heroic Raid if you get lucky and get later boss loot from your vault, but every alt could very easily fill up 3 Hero 3 slots next week from doing 8 Tier 8 Bountiful Delves, which is very feasible. So that is going to be everybody's order of business next week. Kind of regardless, I think, of how hardcore a player they are. It's just a question of how many players they're going to do it on, or how many characters they're going to do it on.
Quick little PoddyPSA as well. I think so far people have been doing delves maybe a little bit for a few weeks, and you just understand it. I just need everyone to know, we need everyone to know that the higher level delves are kind of going to slaughter you at the beginning of next week. Like if you're just going in with the idea of like, I just want only easy content, I don't want to be challenged at all. With the gear you have right now, if you try to do whatever highest tier of delve is available to you next week, you're going to, I mean, obviously you have to go linear to get there. So, I mean, you're going to experience that in time, but like you'll definitely be, there's a death limit, right? It's not timed, but I think you can only die a certain amount of times.
It ramps up as you get into the higher ones. Yeah. So the death limit appears and then it becomes stricter.
I'm interested how people are going to take that, because the proper way to play that could be, oh, I need to finish my tier 8 delve, but it's super, super hard. Or maybe you don't even get there, but whatever one is super, super hard for you. The play is to like wait for lust before you pull literally every single mob, right? That's an extreme example, because I mean, realistically, if you're doing that, if you have to lust to kill every single mob, are you going to kill the mini boss or the boss at the end? Like, definitely not, right? So you're kind of just wasting your time anyway. But I wonder if that cycle is going to be something people enjoy, or something that people feel like they're just in delves for so long just to complete them.
I actually did a couple myself on beta, because like I did this a couple of days ago. I even uploaded a YouTube video on it. I kind of wanted to see exactly how a +8 delve would feel. And yeah, they actually are kind of challenging. I mean, it wasn't like too bad for me because I was playing on DK. I played Frost DK and I tried Blood DK afterwards. And it's actually easier as a tank. But I'm just imagining, because of the class list designed, it's going to be really hard for, say, a cloth user, or say if you were a healer. Like I don't know, that part just doesn't bode well with me when it comes to delves. Like I feel like delves have a lot of potential after doing more of them. They were like, kind of enjoyable, but I have seen a lot of concerns, and a lot of like healers in particular are like, oh, this content sucks. Like who'd help make this, and for a lot of people, it's also just like a chore or it's gonna be very tedious. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually kind of challenging, and I think it's supposed to be easier in a group. So I'm pretty sure if you
It
guys
is
are worried about
definitely
doing
easier
it,
in a group, by the
yeah,
way.
you probably want to do it in a group.
Yeah,
There is no
that's
depletion though, so you can at least like, oh, I mean, like you can run it
Could
again.
you
Like you
imagine?
don't,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
I was hoping you have to like dedicate your bountiful key if you want to like commit to a run, kind of like visions, right? Or kind of like if you're trying to go for a loot, you gotta commit your key, but
no,
you
that's
don't have to do anything.
absolutely antithetical to what delves are trying to be. Like that's trying to
Yeah.
be so, forgiving and chill, while not being entirely, zero. It's trying to be just enough juice that you feel like you're doing something, but then you
Yeah.
can still AFK and get the food out of the oven or whatever in the middle of the run, and it's fine.
I want to talk about something else too. So, were you guys aware of the like leaving and the leaving dungeons
Yes,
discourse last week?
The bench talked about
I
it for enemies.
I think
Who's that?
that okay.
Oh, true. Who?
What's up, Jonas?
The bench who? What's that?
Yeah, who's that?
I don't.
Dorky,
I don't
you
remember.
mentioned something.
Yeah, I think it was like this is something that like occurred in my head, but I completely forgot what it was.
Okay.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Joe.
Anyways, my main point is that this is really important discourse, and if you don't have a strong opinion that you defend on Twitter about dungeon leavers, and if you don't think at least one side involved in that transaction should be like banned for 7 days for what they did, I think that you probably that's a moral failing, and you need to be more passionate about these things.
Dude, I made a insane unforced error on that. So I'll give you a little bit of background. I don't think the content that you can join and leave, I guess, it's literally like heroic dungeons at the beginning of an expansion, right? Like that's the only thing that would ever apply for. I guess Mythic Plus
LFR.
maybe too.
People do it in LFR, right? Like you do LFR, you queue up, you only
Yeah.
need something from the first boss, then you leave after you kill it.
Okay,
All
yeah.
the time.
Okay, so I'll just give you some examples of me. So I first of all, I don't ever queue dungeons at the beginning of the expansion. Really, I've done it a few times this time. I don't think I've ever left one of those groups for loot. I don't think I've ever left a Mythic Plus group in the middle of it that wasn't dying. I don't think I've ever done LFR for any reason to begin with. I am not someone who like actively does this, but in the few examples where I've seen people do it, I don't see it as a huge deal. But I tweeted that, and the responses I got, it was such an unforced error because I didn't realize how much people cared about this. I don't read Reddit or anything like that, so like I was like totally out of the loop. But apparently this was a big fucking deal, and people were like really mad about this. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't seem that big of a deal when someone leaves, because it's true. When someone leaves your group, I mean, I even did it on stream the other day. I made my stream title "Joining and Leaving Dungeons." I wasn't actually doing it. I was the police, and if anyone left, I would hunt them down. And like people were rarely doing it, and if they were, the healer, tank, DPS, whatever, the group is filled instantly, right? So like as someone who's in the dungeon and not and seeing the leavers, it doesn't affect my thing a lot at all. I have heard people queuing in and getting invited, like, and then they're past the boss they want, and that's like a super annoying thing for sure. I just didn't really consider that. But anyways, I didn't really feel super strongly about it, but for whatever reason, I just decided to tweet, which is always the wrong decision, by the way. and I just tweeted, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Even though I don't actually ever do it myself, I just don't think it's that big of a deal that people do it. And boy, did that, I like became the like fucking central point of this leaving thing. Unintentionally. So that was, of the mistakes I made in a while, my like being uninformed of online discourse and just tweeting things, just a big old that fired right back at me.
I mean, I'm personally with you on that. Like, I also don't see it being as huge of a deal as people make it out to be. The only real problem is really the whole like people queuing into these runs, and they don't want to be like in these like halfway runs. Although on the other hand, like sometimes it is nice being in like a halfway run because you can just like quickly reap the rewards at the end, which is like the valor and even EXP if it's like an EXP run.
It depends on what you're going for, right? Because like if everybody is looking for the Arakara trinket, right, then like it's a disaster to be queued in and be right after the boss that dropped it, right? Like that.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on how many people in the population of people queuing are queuing for a trinket from an early boss. Because if it's only like 5% of people queuing for a dungeon want something from an early boss, then yeah, it's completely a non-issue because it's very unlikely that they're gonna land in a spot that's like needing to fill there and not be wanting it. But I feel like the discourse gets so heated because people feel like this is like a rudeness issue or like a lack of
definitely.
respect.
That's the thing. They were like, this is the shopping cart problem,
right?
Like this is if you don't just put your shopping cart away and you just leave it there because someone else will do it, like it just means you're a piece of shit. And then I responded to somebody, I'm like, well, and again, I don't even know why I'm arguing this. I just like saw a problem with that. I'm like, if it took 10 minutes to return the shopping cart, either would there be a better solution, would there be a better system around shopping carts, or like would that many people still put it back if it took that long, which is how long it takes to like
finish
rejoin a dungeon or something. And like I'm just thinking about it, I'm like, I don't actually really even care about this, but I just decided to tweet, and then people were just like, no, this is you just don't get it, you're just the worst, I'm just like, oh my god, oh come on, man. Can't be that bad.
Yeah, I think it's just there's too many players, like all different types of players being shoved into heroic dungeons right now because there's nothing better to do, right? So like right now when you're queuing a heroic dungeon, it could be just like some complete casual, somebody who's completely new to the game, or it could be like you're queuing into Yumi TV, or you could be randomly queuing into like a PvP or like Peekaboo. Like you could just be running into like literally anybody in heroic dungeons, and it's actually been causing a lot of problems. Because I was looking at some of the complaints, and holy hell, there are so many complaints right now about the tanks in LFG. People are saying how like all these tanks. In fact, I got mentioned in like some Reddit post.
What is that? What do you mean tanks in LFG?
And people are complaining about, particularly healers. They're like sweating their asses off in these heroic dungeons, and the tanks are just going absolutely ape shit. Like how like it's a fucking heroic dungeon, right?
This is a tale of old time. You pull it,
you
tank at people, or I can't enjoy this dungeon because you're pulling it too fast.
Yeah, that and people are pulling too fast, right? Because like there's like all these different types of players who want to play, right? There's the ones who are just there to have a first-time dungeon experience. The typical like you want to see the entire dungeon, you want to see what the bosses do, the mobs do. But the tanks are literally just going like how I do on stream, right? You go straight to the boss, and then you go straight to the boss again, and you go straight to the boss again, and it's causing a lot of distress for the civilians, especially on Reddit. It's like really noticeable, and then like some of the comments too are like, oh, they just see Dorky doing this on stream, and all these like wannabe tanks are trying to do the same shit. Yeah, I'm apparently the problem. But look, man, it's just everyone's trying to do fucking heroic dungeons.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault. Easy. Yeah, everyone's trying to be fast and efficient, right? Like people love this shit. They just want to go big pulls and go fast.
Okay, speaking of unforced errors, Blizzard made one here. The only reason that the joining and leaving thing is ever being discussed, and the only reason that the pulling things too fast thing is being discussed is because you're mixing groups of people for no reason.
Exactly.
Mythic being gone at the beginning of this expansion is the reason you are seeing people queuing into heroics looking for the best loot, right? They would be doing Mythic Zeros for that. And Mythic Zeros, there's a different expectation at the beginning of the expansions, right? You do the whole dungeon, right? You're joining a Mythic Zero group via the group finder. You're not going to leave after one boss, right? Like that has never happened, or very rare, right? And also mass pulling it, right? You're not queuing for a heroic and Mythic Zeros are out. If you are right? So those people who are doing heroics and want to experience the dungeon are not with the people that want to be hyper efficient. And also, why are Mythic Zeros not out right now? Why? Yep. Like they would actually be something you could. We were saying that there feels like a void. If you are someone who likes the gameplay of a WoW character, which is likely because WoW gameplay in PvE is insane, so super good. But you can't actually do it right now unless you hit a dummy. Things die before you can press any of your buttons, right? Mythic Zero would solve that problem. They'd be pretty challenging. They wouldn't even have to give better gear than they give next week. Mm-hmm. The gear that they give next week,
veteran track. It's fine
right now. It would not be super OP. It could even be a weekly lockout. It would be perfectly fine. It wouldn't upset the world of crafting, anything. It would all just work. I think Blizzard, now seeing how it played out, and especially seeing how the community reacted to those two groups of people that have always existed at the beginning of the expansion just randomly being mixed together into heroic dungeons all at once and causing these issues, I think it was just an absolute unforced error on Blizzard's part by having Mythic Zeros released the way they are in this expansion.
I think
feel
they
like
should have also released normal raid, man.
yeah, that would have been
Normal
interesting.
raid right now?
A normal
Yeah.
raid and then heroic raid and then mythic week
I'm
the
down
next
with
week.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, normal raid and M0s, and then next week is heroics and maybe some early M plus, and then mythic raid. That's what it should have been like.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that happened is like I feel like heroic dungeons and normal dungeons are still the same. Like they did this big thing at the end of Dragonflight where they were like, "Hey, we're squishing the difficulties, and what used to be M0s is now heroics." And I feel like this expansion, like that's just not
true.
That's clearly not true. Heroics are like still clearly basically just the same as normals, but you can't queue for them as follower dungeons, which if they just enabled that, then people who wanted to pull at their own pace could just do those. Like follower dungeons are sick; they work really well.
Follower dungeons hard own.
Yeah, they're phenomenal.
Yeah, just not to distract too much, but I think just Blizzard's entire philosophy on being able to solo play the game so far as an emphasis in this expansion is hitting perfectly well. Like they nailed that. Yeah.
But I think that could extend to heroic dungeons as well. Like if you're gonna have heroic dungeons that are basically the same difficulty as normal dungeons, let people queue follower for them as well, and then that fixes DPS queue times, and that fixes the issue of queuing up and not having a tank that is pulling at the pace you like, because it just is your pace. And then if you want more coordinated gameplay, go to normals.
True.
Or mythics rather, mythic zeros. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if mythic zeros are gonna follow.
Yeah, they're supposed to be what, like plus 8s.
Exactly, like they're supposed to be old plus 10s. I guess it's weird because like there's no affixes or whatever, but like somewhere around an old plus 8 to a plus 10, like back in the day, not the new numbers. And if that's actually true, it will be comical how hard they will be right away at the beginning of the expansion for the average player, and how low the reward you get from them. That's the thing that I still don't get. Like yeah, they said, oh, heroics are the new mythic zeros. They didn't do that. The heroics gear is super whatever, so their gear wasn't really buffed. And also the difficulty is there. So I could see that even going wrong with mythic zero. Let's say mythic zeros are super easy and the gear is super bad. That would kind of suck, but what might even suck more is if they're actually really hard. You want a good relative scale of like the reward you're getting from something matching the challenge it took to complete it. That's kind of an RPG thing. Like mythic zeros are a absolute failure at that, regardless of the release frame. So I really huge question. I think what we think, right, is we think that they wanted Delves to be the star of the show next week, right? Mm-hmm. That's the whole, like, Mythic Zeros had to sacrifice. They said what Mythic Zeros would be in Season 4. They actually made sense in Season 4. Sorry, weren't Mythic Zeros cool in Season 4? Wasn't, like, doing some of the mega dungeons on Season 4, like, actually, like, really challenging?
Mode was cool.
Hard mode was harder than, it was like a plus 8 but untimed, which was sick. Or a plus 10 but untimed, which was super sick.
It was harder than the plus 10. Yeah, that shit was hard as hell. I mean, I remember that idea I said where we should have hard mode dungeons, bro. I think that would go so fucking hard, but
yeah, but like my point is like in Season 4, Mythic Zeros served a purpose and they were cool and unique and different from the other content in the game. Now they don't do any of that.
Yeah,
they give awful gear. Yeah. They're probably going to be harder than they need to be. I don't know why anyone would interact with them. I think it's just they totally fucked that up.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's to promote Delves. Like I feel like even 100%. If they do that this season, like they could fix it next season and be like, okay, now you have M0 as an option as well, but you have gotten used to Delves and everybody's done a bunch of Delves. So like everybody who likes Delves is in the ecosystem now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even that, because M0s are usually only relevant in the beginning of the expansion and you can't really recapture that. And I think part of what makes it so awkward at the moment is this is the first time we're getting the upgrade system in the beginning of the expansion, and it's actually causing people to gear up much quicker than I expected. Because initially I was expecting people to be like struggling with M0s and M10s when it comes out. But the more I think about it, people are going to be so fucking geared in the next 2 weeks. Especially like knowing how degenerate some people have been going. Like, I'm surprised by how many of my chat, for example, is more geared than me. There are just people who are running around with like fucking 5 characters that are.
It's the Dragonflight rare and dirt thing again. It's just people in the first 2 weeks just are like, even though they know it doesn't matter, they're like, I have to have the best of everything. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and next week, I mean, people are just gonna be rolling around with like.
I mean, you could just print champion track items, right? Next week, and then hero from raid, and so.
Yep.
If you're AOTC in that week, like there's nothing else going on. Guilds are adding extra splits so that people have more, like people's mains will be even better geared than usual. It's definitely going to be interesting. I wonder how much of that, like, it reminds me a bit of the start of Legion, where Blizzard was just kind of caught off guard by just how geared everybody was when they introduced M+. And I feel like the extra long lead up time, the extra weeks of like carved crest maximum building up, and all the champ track gear from Bountiful Delves and all the keys we've accumulated for those Bountiful Delves. I wonder how much that's going to mean that the average character is like stronger, quicker than they would have thought, even after they've nerfed a bunch of stuff about like crafted gear. It costs 50% more aspect crests to make a crafted 633 or whatever it is this time around. So I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious to see what that ends up doing for, like you said, Dorky, doing 10s the first week that keys come out, but also like for the raid.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be hard, but it's actually gonna be easy with like how much gear people are getting. And I think a large reason for that is because there's so much stuff you can get right now pre-season. Like on one hand, I think that's a good thing that you can like acquire all these crests and whatever the hell it may be from like renown and all these other sources. Like it's good that the game rewards you for doing all these little activities and people are actively engaging in the world. But on the other hand, I have friends who are going into next week who only play one character that will have like 200 carved crests. Like that's not counting towards their cap. That is crazy. That means like next week we're gonna have over 500 carved crests. That means you can straight up upgrade every single normal piece to 619. That's a crazy amount of gear you're getting on the first week. Like we're talking people who are running around close to 620 AM level, if not higher.
I suspect
on the first week.
I suspect that Blizzard should not have had that cap start going up until next week. Like that cap should be starting at 90 next week, not 270 or whatever it is.
I'm really interested into whether that's, when we looked at that a couple weeks ago, we thought that they were going to tune that down. Like basically it was going to start from the beginning of the expansion and then like next week it'll go away. But they had aspects not accumulating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that seems intentional, and if they did that, then they should have done the carve thing that they didn't. So that, it's
because you can earn some of your seasonal carved from like your first theater troop or whatever. So maybe that's like,
you can earn a lot.
Yeah, well, you can earn a solid chunk now, but like most of the ones you can earn now are the ones that are ignore the cap rather than the ones within the season cap.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that would feel really bad if they actually limited it, because like players right now they're fiending for shit to do, and right now they have that shit to do, and it's not just raid and M+ and PvP.
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on how they did it, but yeah, it's too late to do it now for this season, but maybe a lesson to learn for a future season.
Are you guys excited for next week? Dude, I'm actually like, dude, a couple of my players are getting here on Monday. I think I'm gonna move into the facility with all my stuff on Monday. Like all the boys are coming to town. Heroic Week for us is like the beginning of the race, it's like super hype. You're with your dudes all the time. You're doing a million splits. You're like hanging out. I'm like, it's like, it definitely officially hit me that like the expansion is out,
Yeah, the expansion is finally starting. Holy.
Yeah, for me, most of the hype I think is still concentrated on Mythic Week, but I definitely like the fact like it's going to be a lot more going on than there was this week. For instance, this week has felt like such a nothing week.
I barely played the game this week. But a lot of other people are. So
no, again, I'm happy for it in general, but for me personally, like, and it's not like I'm unhappy doing stuff outside of WoW. There's a lot of good stuff to do outside of WoW currently, but yeah,
I've never seen it more polarizing.
Yeah, I am hyped for next week for sure.
You guys like saw all the anniversary stuff and all like the classic stuff they're bringing back, right? It's actually, I find it really interesting because I swear my theory a while ago, it was like way back in BlizzCon when they announced SOD, because like initially I was thinking, what are they gonna do after SOD ends and Kata ends? Are they just gonna continue on to like MOP and like maybe do some classic plus shit, or like are they just gonna rerun SOD? But I swear they're trying to converge all the players into retail, and it's all slowly happening. We're seeing it in this trailer or whatever.
Bro, this has been the whole point of Classic, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, this is
From the
all
very
coming
beginning.
together
That is
now.
what they've been doing. Yeah.
They're
You think it
appealing
was
to the Classic players. Because they're having like the Classic BRD rate. Wow, like an all-time classic. Everyone fucking loves BRD. They're re-skinning or whatever, retexturing all of the tier 2 transmogs, and people are like so hyped for that. I swear they're just like trying to appeal to the classic Andes. Dude, also speaking of, there are so many classic Andes who are pissed about this because they're like, no shot, we're doing this in retail and not in SOD.
Oh, I mean, those people will never be happy at anything, but I think they've been doing this forever. Like, I remember there was like a couple patches in Shadowlands in the leading up to Dragonflight where like basically every new system or thing looked like it came from Classic. And that was so obvious that they were trying to do that. And also everything is split up, so they're like not weaning them off of it, but like they want to normalize doing one thing and then the next thing. And if you're actually playing both games, you're a Classic person that they've convinced to try retail again. You're actually like, you have new like WoW content kind of like every like 3 weeks or something. It's like all the time. And then maybe eventually you're just playing retail, because you're right, because you're probably going to run out of runway with Classic at some point. You mentioned like, are they just going to go down? I think they're going to send the Classic line like all the way. I think they're going to rip it like all the way through, at least through like Legion. And the crazy thing is the Classic things happened faster than the expansions did, right? Is that right?
A little
bit, like a year.
It's less like than you would think, but yeah, it is faster than it was the first time.
So, like, I mean, if they were actually going to just send it indefinitely, it actually would catch up to retail at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that would take, but, that's in the cards. So, there is no runway there. I guess Season of Discovery was meant to be a, Classic Plus PTR. Was that words from Blizzard? No, was that, like... So. Was that a gleaning from a content creator? Because like maybe what they'll do is just do that at some point, but I don't even know what that means. That just sounds like Classic Plus just sounds like worse retail. I don't get Classic, right? So like, I'm not the person to give a take about this, but I just don't understand how Classic Plus is just like worse class design retail, Yeah,
they're 100% absorbing the Classic players into WoW, because I mean they've been keeping the WoW players in, well, not just WoW players, but like the Classic players in the whole WoW bubble for the past 2 years or so. And now that I'm sure there's been like a lot of Classic players who are like, let's try War Within. I might not have played WoW since like MoP or some shit, but let's see what War Within's like. I mean, a lot of the Classic content creators have been playing retail too, so I feel like that adds a lot to it.
I have a bit of a cook for what's happened is like.
Okay.
Classic was coming out. There was the Classic hype build up. And so like leading into Shadowlands, they thought that what made Classic good and what they should bring back to retail about it was like system friction and stuff like that, like with the covenant locking and those sorts of things. And it's like, it's like in Classic where if you're a weaponsmith or an armorsmith, like that's a choice. Or
I mean, if Covenants came out in BC, it would have been like people would talk about it now as the best time WoW ever existed. You hated it in 2020, yeah.
And that's when obviously there was huge backlash for that. Then Dragonflight was kind of like, okay, recovery, do some basic stuff to the game. And now with War Within, I feel like they've instead picked a couple of different things about what WoW has lost since Classic, of like a sense of, a world with a story that the players are a part of, that is a good story with characters that they recognize, but it's not just the same story again, regurgitated, right? It's like new. There's some intangible mixture of familiarity and novelty to the setting that I think has really landed for those. And I think that captures a lot of people who liked Classic, I think will like War Within for that as well. Plus the drop in, drop out, solo a bunch of stuff, some decently hard solo content, right? Like Classic was all about decently hard solo content at the time, which was leveling because we were bad, and that leveling was hard because we sucked. And now there's like, delves, are kind of in that space, right? And it's like, if you open up your world map, like there's stuff to do that feels like it's worth doing in all the zones and things. And that definitely didn't exist in Dragonflight and Shadowlands. And Dragonflight and Shadowlands, like that, there was none of that at all. So I think that they basically have picked they've got a different idea for like what the essence of Classic is that they can put back into WoW without, compromising the things that retail has actually improved over the past 18 years. So that's my cook on what's been going on.
I think it's a good cook.
Yeah, I think so too.
On a completely unrelated note,
love it.
One thing about this anniversary thing is that a bunch of classes can be Dracthyr.
Yep.
And I think that is going to be absurdly OP. Like, I think you're going to see basically every class that can be a Dracthyr be a Dracthyr.
Well, which part exactly is going to be OP?
The fact that you can hover. Hover is absurdly broken. Double jump, glide,
no,
and
but you can't
hover.
double jump though, right?
I'm just saying, like, glide and hover as functions are extremely insane. Like, as like a caster, as like a like a healer priest or something, getting that extra little mobility before. I mean, it's just insane.
Wait, hold on. No, but you can't hover as a non-evoker or.
Yeah, you can.
Did I use the wrong word?
All the a Dracthyr priest can, I think. Yeah.
No.
Like you do a little dash thingy.
I am specifically referring to gliding.
Oh, glide.
I have said another word.
Glide, yeah.
Just glide. Just glide alone.
Yeah.
Insane. I think like it's not something that adds to your damage, but I think is just super, super helpful permanently. If you guys have ever played a class with hover or glide, you would or not. I keep saying hover. Sorry, glide or what's the DH one called?
It's also glide.
Yeah. Glide. Yeah. So glide's OP, and I think everyone will play those classes, among other things, because of glide.
Wait, but why is it so OP?
I just think
so many
sick.
raid fights. It'd be sick on, right? Like Fire Act, you get knocked up twice in that fight. Tap glide, cancel it, right? Like Painsmith, jump around the edge, get back on. You don't have to do any weird stuff with the gateway.
And it's also
anything.
just good for movement.
Yeah.
Right. Like just like little micro movements. It's really strong.
I mean, I would say most end bosses, it would have been sick on, right? Like Sark has a knockback, Raz has a knockback.
Our casters today were literally everyone will be that, and it's purely because of glide.
Did you see as well? There's some cool new talents that are interesting, or like new effects. They've made a couple of things not get affected by healing received modifiers, including Renewing Blaze, which remember that Evokers can give to a friend with one of the hero talent trees, and also Lay on Hands can ignore it. That strikes me as something as well that would come. Like, you remember Broodkeeper Diurna, where your tank just gets hit for 1,000,000 damage and then has a immune to healing thing on them? Imagine just being able to Lay on Hands through that. Like, that's kind of...
I actually think that's really, really good.
Yeah.
I think that's really good because typically the only way to deal with things like that before was like really niche utility like Bop. So they're just allowing a few other super niche utility things to also work with that. I think that's really good for the game. Like the scenarios were just like bring a paladin, which is really weird, or do some kind of
yeah, although it is still kind of bring a paladin because they're the ones with the land hands that doesn't.
Yeah, but one paladin can do twice the amount of things.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, I just think it's an interesting effect to have in these patch notes.
I didn't even get a chance to read all of them. I just saw that they were doing a ton for Hunt. Oh my god, I'm just scrolling. This is crazy.
Yeah, youtube.com/Dratnos. There's patch notes being read through there already. It's up if you.
Wait, you already released it?
Oh yeah, it's been up for hours. It's
You went through all of this? How long is the video?
Like 45 minutes or something. You know.
Yeah, I'll be listening to that later.
Oh yeah.
Used to listen to that. I used to listen to Dratnos patch note reads on my runs.
Oh hell yeah.
They're solid. Keeps you locked in.
That owns. Oh wow. Yeah, they are.
Anything else?
What's that?
I was thinking if you guys had anything else cool you wanted to talk about. If you still want to rip on this.
There's the Evoker racials. They nerfed the CC ones, and it's. I think they're going to be fair at 3 minutes. I don't know. Like you said, I think it's a really powerful race. Like just because of being able to cancel knockbacks, and also, it's kind of just a 40% movement speed passive if you just jump glide a lot, right? Like that. That's kind of a crazy effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know Evokers could double jump.
You don't double jump, but you just tapping glide. You increase your speed briefly every time you do it. So if you need to get somewhere fast and you spam space, you go at like 140% speed on average.
Yeah, I've only ever played the Demon Hunter version.
Yeah, DH can do that too. Actually, DH, it's a little bit hard. You can do tapping space right as you land, and you actually go faster than if you spam it.
You just bind. You can do the same thing on DH. You just bind glide.
Yeah, you can do it. That's the less cool way of doing it than getting the exact perfect frame perfect spacebar input.
Yeah, I remember bringing that up because like ever since I've played DH, binding glide was like a very normal thing to do because you would want to like if you want to stop a knockback, you want to do it at the precise moment. You don't want to double jump and then get the weird lane up to you. It's much simpler and you can do more with it. And I brought that up to my chat and they were like, "Bro, that's so corny." I'm like, "Yeah, it is kind of corny, I guess, but it's also good."
It's also not like you don't have extra keybinds if it's a DH, right? Like you have 30 buttons that you have bound on other specs that you can use for that. So
exactly, yeah. Like if you ever play like an enhanced shaman and then you go play other melee, you have some real estate to assign to some buttons for sure.
Oh yeah. Okay, that was all I had for these notes. Yeah, Dorky, you got anything?
Any other pre-heroic week thoughts? That the silence from Dorky is no.
Yeah,
it is not.
Let's meander to our Patreon question then, perchance.
Yeah.
That sound good? All right, this one comes from Dungeons and Deadlifts. Hello, podcasters. I'm primarily a hardcore lurker, but giving this a shot, hell yeah, we love the lurkers. I'm always a lurker. Most of the content I consume as well.
Only lurk.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to lurkers.
Shout out to lurkers. I've been primarily a moderate casual, AOTC 3.1k score, that plays on a limited schedule. With the changes for affixes and more within, and that push weeks are more or less gone, I've made it a goal to pursue title for M+. Cool. Nice. I play tank and get anxious thinking about playing higher keys, mainly having the responsibility in cooking up routes for high keys. From what I've seen, after a certain key level, groups have to play more risky, do skips, and utilize dungeon tech to time keys in a timely fashion. Usually I played around portal player range. Oh, portal player. Okay, yeah, getting the portals. And call it good. And all the players in that bracket are usually familiar with basic pug routes. Watching higher key players, I noticed their routes are vastly different from that 2.5 to 2.8k range. What advice do you have to give to someone coming up with routes, and how do you approach problem solving in a key? For example, if someone butt pulls and we end up with more than enough count, do you also take into consideration comp, specs, etc.? I primarily pug, but will be networking for like-minded gamers to run with. Thanks. This is a dorky question if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, so I'm an expert on this. So I would say, first of all, there's not a worry about like all cooking up routes and all that. Like, I swear with how dungeons are nowadays, I want to say ever since Dragonflight, they're way more linear. You can pretty much W route, and chances are you're really not pulling more than 1 or 2 packs at a time. And if there ever are packs that you're pulling multiple at a time, it's like the ones that everyone's already doing. I would say the biggest thing by far, if you're trying to get into these higher keys, is to just like be in the loop. And what I mean by this is just either like watching streams or just like everyone just sort of knows what's going on when you're doing higher keys. Like there's sort of an expectation, I guess, and that could be kind of scary. But once you like figure it out once, or once you've seen it once, is what I meant to say, you don't feel like there's anything too special about it. It's not as crazy as you might make it out to be. I mean, there is like some anxiety when it comes to playing higher keys, and when you're pugging, it's especially scary because you're just playing with like a bunch of people that you might not know, and you don't want to just like suddenly die or fuck up. But yeah, by far the biggest thing is to just stay in the loop. That's all I really have to say. Like, if you're in the loop and if you know, you know. If you like, everyone already knows the tech for certain things. People figure this shit out super quick. It's not too complicated.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you have any like advice for staying in the loop on like a short time schedule? Like, say you don't want to spend all day either playing WoW or consuming WoW content. Like, where do you think the best way to get the best bang for your buck in terms of staying in the loop?
Probably twitch.tv/dorky, right?
That does sound pretty good to me. Yeah. YouTube.com/dorky as well. Let's not forget.
Yeah, let's not forget. No, but like actually though, it's just like it's one of those things where people will probably talk about it. Like, okay. I know people always talk about nobody ever says anything in pugs. This is not as true the higher you go in keys. The higher you go in keys, the more likely you'll find players who are like-minded and they're trying to figure out how to problem solve. How to figure out how to deal with a very specific boss. Say, Throne of Tides. How people figured out how to do the first boss, the Naga boss, where you have to stand in a specific formation to make sure it always jumps to the tank. That stuff becomes common knowledge in high keys, and it just gets talked about. And I'm sure there's probably discords too that you can join that are full of high key players, and they're probably linking clips and talking about specific tech or routes all the time. So
it's like
it's mostly about being in the community.
Isn't it like PoE, where it's you're oh man, I'm a tank now, I'm gonna do high keys. Oh, I have to learn how to cook everything. No, you don't, man. Just copy what people are doing. You don't have to, and you don't have to probably spend too long. Also, you're making a good choice as a tank. Number one, I think pushing high keys as a tank is the most value thing. You always have a group. You'll instantly have a group every single time. You never have to wait for a group. And I think really honestly, if you boil down people's complaints about Mythic Plus, the number one by far is what? How long it takes to get in a group? Why do you think people complain about balancing all the time? It's purely because of Mythic Plus queue times, right? So you don't have that. That's great. And if you're a tank, you're kind of this. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but dungeons are really, really fun to tank. And you're going to be going into key levels that actually challenge you. And at some level, depending on how good you are, you will actually feel your problem solving on a personal level is how do I live this pack and the next pack and the pack after that? And that problem solving on a personal level is really, really fun. And that's not something you need to learn how to do, really. That's just playing the game, right? That's just playing the game. You'll just get better at the game. Yeah, you'll figure it out. And that's really, really fun. And I think you're thinking too much about oh, I usually play around portal range. Well, you play around portal range and you're familiar. You said you're familiar with pug routes. Okay, that's because you're familiar with the routes that the people around you that you're playing with are used to doing. That is the exact same thing, just at a higher key. You're going to be doing the routes that that other people like to do. You'll go into a key and someone will be I did this route earlier and I think it's good. They'll link it and you're fuck it, I'll slam that. Put it on your other monitor and try it, right? I think you're putting way too much pressure on yourself. And the tank role in general is the person who's coming up with everything. That's just not even how that works.
I will say though, it definitely can be a little cringe if you fail once and then people take it very negatively because it is a pretty closed community, right? The high key community, there's not that many people doing it, and it could very well be that situation where you become that guy. So I'm not to try to put I'm not trying to, push any anxiety
so
towards.
Don't be anxious, but if you fuck up at all, no one will play with you ever again.
No one will play with you ever again. Exactly. No, but there's definitely some levels of that. So
I don't know. I think if you're going for title range, not high keys. There's relative in everything. When I hear of a guild that rates 5 nights a week, to me, that's casual. That's ridiculous. It's not casual, but it is to me, right?
Yeah, it's casual.
So when Dorky's saying high keys, there's very few people in high keys. His level of high keys, there's I think exactly 4 tanks you can queue with. It is. I think when you're talking about going for title, doing 15, 16, 17s, things like that around that road, there's a lot of people, man. You're not gonna get fucking blacklisted for messing stuff up. Just be prepared, play the game. Your score will end up being as good as you are as long as you're putting adequate time into it.
Yeah, it's all about numbers because as long as you're grinding out the keys, you'll eventually get there.
But don't ever fuck up.
That's right.
Don't ever fuck up. You don't want to be put on the blacklist. You don't want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Side note, I think it's cool that we have somebody saying that oh, these changes make me want to push title. That's
actually I wanted to mention that at the very beginning, but I feel like Dorky needed his space to. This is a Dorky question, but that is a. Oh, they made these changes to Mythic Plus, so now I want to push for score. I actually am that's maybe my number one interest in this patch, is how does the new high key system play out and how people enjoy that. I think it's a big wild card. I could see a world where people love it and absolutely hate it. So we'll see how that plays out.
My biggest concern is how small the gap is. Goddamn, the 12 keys are so hard right now. It's actually ridiculous.
What do you mean small the gap is?
Between the 12 and the highest keys.
Yeah. Jumping from an 11 to a 12 is a massive jump, and then jumping from 12s, is title going to be 14s? Maybe. That's
Yeah, it's
you're
like
gonna
one key level
have
could be
an
the title.
insane amount of gear in this patch, as opposed to the very beginning. Like you're gonna be
That's fair.
what, like 15 eye levels higher than what you are in the first couple weeks or something like that.
That's fair, but I mean, we beta tested them at what 626 or something. Is that
which is like
not far
high.
off. Like we're gonna be 13 eye levels on that or something, but that's not a huge amount more. And 12s were hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had this conversation a while ago, and I mentioned that like the jump in between keys is going to be just so like just bigger than before, to where you'll feel. And I forget who it was. Someone argued that it's. I think it was a JB take. I think JB had like a crazy take about this, where it's like if there's one level that's I think that's I remember it. If one level is like literally impossible, and the next level under that is doable, that is good because class balance matters less, because every class will be able to do that and not the next one, which is like I couldn't really follow along with that. It was a wild one.
Yeah, if we removed all key levels except for 2s and 20s, class balance would be really good in the game because everybody could do a 2 and nobody could do a 20.
That's true.
That's pretty much what his take was. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Well, I think that's about it. If we're actually recording 2 drama times after this for patrons, so you guys will be eating good in the next couple bits. So if you guys are a patron, we'll see you in a few minutes.
That's right.
Yep, we're going to be talking about the spiciest drama. Apparently, there's been some crazy drama going on.
That's exactly it. Yeah, Poddyos, unless you're a super cool patron or somebody now feeling FOMO and about to subscribe to our Patreon. That's right.
Yes.
Welcome.
And you get early access too.
Yeah.
We have some crazy Patreon episodes.
Yeah, you can also get a Patreon subscription for free if you steal it from somebody.
Overdoing it.
Steal some money or a login to Patreon. Either of those, you can get it for free. So that's a nice little life hack right there. Yeah.
Yes, do steal.
That's right.
Do steal.
Commit crimes.
Yes,
right.
bye.
Bye.